Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. My name is Casey Willis, and I am the podcast manager for Goodie Nation. And you are tuned into Why Relationships Matter in the Innovation Economy. And so, what is Goodie Nation for those of you who don't know? Goodie Nation is an organization that exists to bridge the relationship gap between so many promising founders. These are founders from underserved communities, founders from the social entrepreneurship space, founders in areas of the innovation economy that aren't always the first ones who are given opportunities. And so, what we do is we try to make sure that those founders get access to those opportunities by providing mentorship, coaching, cohort style learning, and other ways to make sure that founders are meeting the people who could ultimately help them in their careers. And so, why do we do Why Relationships Matter? Well, a lot of the times when we hear about entrepreneurship and the innovation economy, we're talking about who's raising what fund and what deals are being made. And that's great. We love those big wins. But we like to focus on this show about the relationships that help those founders get to those wins, those small steps that help to connect the dots. And so on this particular episode, we have almost like a very special Goodie Nation story featuring two founders who, like, I can't spoil anything, but let's just say building relationships in the innovation economy really mattered for these two folks. And so I want to jump into it right now by introducing you first to Joe Thurman. Joe, why don't you tell us who you are and just give us a little bit of background about your career, about your company, anything you want the people to know.
Awesome. Yeah, no, thanks, Casey. Excited to be on the podcast. And so Joe Thurman, co-founder and CEO of IIA Healthcare, formerly Interview IA. We build intelligent solutions around hiring, the hiring ecosystem, specifically in healthcare. We're a Denver-based startup, and really proud to be on this show. And relationships are something that I do believe are so important. But raised in Colorado, born actually on the East Coast, an Air Force brat. Went to school for technology, but fell in love with the human side of thinking about building teams, thinking about how innovation is truly driven by the collective mindset of people. Great customer success is driven by the people behind it. And so my career for the last 18 years has been in the talent space, talent management, talent change management. Super excited to share what we're building, why the relationship with David and many others, Goodie Nation, Google, some shared investors has really played a big role in where we're headed and what we're building for the market. So super excited to share more.
Very nice. We're super excited to hear it. David, why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are?
Yeah, hey everyone, great to be here. Really excited to share more. My name is David Lopez, co-founder and CEO at Gritly. But ultimately, we are here today talking about, IIA's healthcare acquisition of Gritly. And so actually, I'll be transitioning over into my new role, which will be the VP of partnerships and growth at the organization. So super excited to start saying that out loud and being able to share that with everyone. But to tell you a little bit more about myself, born and raised in and around Denver, so Colorado native, still here. And, ultimately, I come from a low-income, single-parent household. I was the first out of my parents to graduate high school. And, I had a unique opportunity to get a full-ride scholarship to go to college. But then that's when I, really realized that my community wasn't there. A lot of who I grew up with, and around didn't go with me to take that next step. And so ultimately, from that dynamic, have been able to be an impact entrepreneur, trying to just turn back around and help my community access economic mobility in ways that we traditionally didn't have access to. That way, it's not just about college, but it could be about all the other opportunities to upscale and get into industries that matter most, such as healthcare. And so with that, really excited to share more about how Joe and I became, connected and ultimately why the relationships that we built along the way have transitioned into, such a really exciting opportunity in and around innovation and hiring and healthcare, and ultimately, how we're really banding together to bring an innovative solution to market.
Very cool. So I guess the first question that I want to know, that I'm sure other people want to know, so we're based in Denver. Did you run into one another at any point before Goodie Nation?
Yeah, I mean the Denver tech scene, the Denver entrepreneurial scene is growing and is booming, but is also still pretty small and just on its way up. But also founders from underrepresented backgrounds or underestimated backgrounds, as it's starting to be called, which I like, is even smaller, right? And so tech founders from Latino backgrounds, from Black backgrounds, people, women. It's a pretty small network, and so we did know each other. We actually share an investor. A really great thing that's fun to share is David was the first and only Latino Founders Fund recipient for Google, and then we were the first and only in Colorado. Sorry, let me clarify, in Colorado, and that was 2 years ago, David.
Yep.
Yeah, and then last year we were the first, and so far, I'm going to clarify this. So far, the only Black Founders Fund recipient from Google. So we're two of the kind of initial Black founder and Latino founder fund backed startups in Denver. So we had different ways that we were connected. That brought us to Goodie Nation, such an amazing group that just continued to build. But yes, we had collisions, whether they were intentional or just by being in the same community for some years.
And I could just add to that, being the, starting Gritly out of, our dorm room at, University of Colorado Boulder, there wasn't, like Joe mentioned, there's not a ton of founders who are, moving and shaking and having impact the way that Joe and the IIA team was currently having. And so, for me, as a young, first-time founder, I was always looking at Joe and the team as kind of the founders and entrepreneurs that I wanted to be like, that were 5, 6, 7 steps ahead of me, where, I'm trying to understand and realize a lot of what they were doing. But at the same time, too, knowing that Joe was very accessible. Every interaction we've always had was always around, how can we help? How can we share resources? What, introductions can we make? Are there opportunities for us to work together? And I think that is, really inclusive and fosters the community that we have. Why it may not be the biggest network, it is, very mighty in that, and so with that kind of really, entrepreneurial and give first ecosystem that we've both been able to, contribute and take from, I think is what has always allowed us to, know we're connected and in network, but it's, also just a little bit deeper than that, knowing, what ties we have in similar backgrounds.
That's me. I love how you sort of both mentioned about how sometimes the interactions were intentional. Sometimes it's just a product of the city where you were and the industry that you were in. But that it sounds like the vibes were always good. No competition vibes. They're like, oh, who are you? Which is lovely to hear. And so before we dive into how Gritly became acquired by IIA, healthcare, I would like to know from both of you a little bit more about your journeys of founding your individual companies. Were there any key relationships, whether it was from family, professors, investors, just friends who were like, oh, that's a good idea. You should do that. That kind of helped you to build your individual companies. And then we're going to talk a little bit later about what led to this merger. And so David, if you don't mind kicking us off.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as I mentioned previously, we were building Gritly out of a need to have an impact on the communities that I was, surrounded by, growing up, government assistance programs, you name them, we were on them. And so when it came time to go to college, I felt closer to a unicorn or a one of one than, knowing that everyone was going to be with me to take that next step. And so ultimately what we decided to do was build an alternative to college for the people that couldn't afford it or couldn't, dedicate the time or resources necessary to complete a degree, at which point Gritly 1.0 was actually just a tech sales boot camp. It was online, 12 weeks long. We had it to be both asynchronous as well as live. And really, we just wanted to offer a program that can help, get underserved individuals from, those kind of backgrounds into careers in technology, even if that doesn't mean being technical. And so we looked at sales as that first kind of lowest hanging fruit. We went after it. And through that, we were able to see, our candidates go through our programs and double and triple their incomes and get access to full benefits for the first time in their careers and get off of government assistance programs. So a lot of the relationships we built early on were with folks who looked like me, where I was able to understand, what their circumstances were and how I can, best meet them where they were at. And I think, each of those initial relationships, whether it be with the employers that were actually hiring these candidates as they're finishing, the candidates themselves, or any other of the partners that were in our ecosystem that were supporting these individuals throughout their journey, really just cemented the fact that while we're helping folks get into technology, like Joe mentioned, this is about people, right? And believing in them and giving them the access and resources and technology and curriculum that they needed to change their lives. And so ultimately, while we were excited to launch and scale our program, we also knew that we needed to lean on technology in order to do that. At which point, our team was able to come together and develop what we like to look at as a first of its kind upskilling management system, where, yes, it was where you learn, but it was also, where you get hired and how employers can engage, not based on your credentials or degree, but based on your actual performance. So that way we can bring equity back into the hands of the job seeker. And so it was really there that we decided that, there's a much bigger opportunity for us based on, the market need that we were getting inbound from what we thought was at that time our competition, which were other vocational training programs that were coming to us and saying, hey, we're actually facing some of the same issues. We want to get more of our candidates hired. We want to make it easier for employers to hire those candidates. And we just need the software to do that. And so we decided there's a much bigger opportunity for us to, go from being one player in the vocational training space to, pivoting and commercializing the product we built for ourselves and bringing to market, and commercializing that upskilling management system. And so, through that, part of the relationships gained there, like I mentioned, was at first we thought we were talking to our competition that was coming to us. And in all reality, we were actually talking to a number of, collaborators, cooperators, and even potential future customers, at which point, for us, it was important to base and be adaptive to our framing and how we took a lot of these conversations, with an open mindset. And it turns out that, sharing notes is actually, can get us all a lot further along than trying to look at something as mine and only mine or anything like that. So, lo and behold, we pivoted and we commercialized the technology. And, through that is when we got Google to believe in us and when we were able to, join the Goodie Nation family. And then shortly after that, went through the Techstars Workforce Development Program before being able to raise a little bit of venture capital, at which point is where Joe and I got the same investor on our cap table that really brought a lot of this home. So that's our journey in a nutshell.
No, that's really great. And I love, what's the term? Is it cooperation? Competition? It's something that people are saying about yes, you are against other folks, but also kind of, the rising tide raises all ships mentality is also in there. So no, very, very cool. Joe, what about you? And you actually left us off, David, on just a really good, cliffhanger of and this is how Joe and I linked up. But before we get there, Joe, tell us a little bit more about your journey.
Yeah, I mean, relationships, mentors, like you mentioned, I mean, you could do a whole webinar on that. I mean, a whole podcast on that. Joke, I know that's what you do. So it's so important. I mean, I wouldn't be here without the amazing board that we have and who have truly become, deeper friends and mentors along the way. I'm just a big believer in, leaning on people for their expertise and acknowledging, how much knowledge other people can bring to your journey. And it's been essential to my journey as an entrepreneur so I'm a second time founder. The first business was actually more bootstrapped and we built it into a consultancy that was Denver based, working with Fortune 200 companies around talent strategy, talent branding. And we had little micro products that people used, one of which was focused on, selection science, interview management. And that was one of the things that everybody really fell in love with. And just through listening to customers, and asking a lot of questions and having a network where you could go out and say, hey, if in the future I was to decide to make this the main the main venture and go out and build something different, what would that take? And there were years of just exploring and thinking about that, and building great relationships, and just continuing to test. Which, as an entrepreneur, I'm always inspired by just meeting other entrepreneurs who are taking the journey of learning by scraping all the skin off of our knees and elbows and foreheads, and just really trying to make something that matters out in the world. And so through that, fast forward and launch an organization that's a software platform, really just focused on how can we mitigate bias within the hiring process? How can we think about talent selection in a more objective way? How can we start to organize the way that people hire for high volume, mid to high level skilled work? I think that the future of how we think about workforce, how we think about building teams, really has to rely heavily on how can technology be an enabler? How can it be something that helps to reduce the errors that we make in our own judgments of people through selection? And the interview process is a great place to start with testing that and building solutions around that. And so through all of that and continuing to build, we went out and raised friends and family round, a seed round, and we're testing in two primary markets, technology and healthcare. And healthcare just continued to emerge as the market that we most naturally fit into. So the organic growth of healthcare caused us to lean in, and again, back to relationships and having conversations with not only customers, but people in the market who are willing to lean in and talk about innovation is what really drove us to just go very, very deep on the impact and the importance that enabling the future of talent in healthcare is so essential to society, and such a big task that it can't just be solved by one thing or by old school means of just contract labor or something like that. There's so many problems. If you research all the problems we face from a staffing perspective in healthcare, in the healthcare provider space, it's exciting to think about how innovation can drive that forward. So you continue to explore and build, and we did a seed extension and brought in a new investor. That's the investor that we share, Dimmy Fund out of Colorado, between Gritly and IIA, and started to think about the bigger picture, the bigger pie of if you can think about talent mobility, upskilling with selecting the right people, with creating the right mobility for those individuals. Excuse me, I'm getting over a little bit of a cold, but it unlocks a really exciting future. And then, more that we'll unpack in this is how can two founders think about how can we both be humble enough, both be excited enough about a big vision to come together, to think about building something that was bigger than what I think both of us were building individually. And just a really, really exciting story. And it wouldn't be possible without mentorship, guidance, relationships, where you can pick up a phone and ask questions and be vulnerable and be candid about what you're thinking, what you know, what you don't know. And as founders, that is, that's liquid gold when you have those relationships that you can be vulnerable with, most importantly, while building and thinking about how to realize the dream that we're set out to try to achieve.
So I don't think that you could have set me up better for where we're going next. I think this is what the people came for. So you both have given us amazing background on your individual journeys, on the problems that you identified and said, oh, I have to fix this. I have to fix this. And you both end up in Google for Startups, and therefore you both end up in Goodie Nation. Mm-hmm. Why don't we pick up there? What are y'all, were you in like the same huddles? Were you just kind of like, oh, seeing each other around? Was it an instant like, I like your thing, let's get together? What was sort of like the Goodie Nation origin story of you two sort of getting to know each other within the program?
Yeah, so we weren't in the same Goodie Nation huddles. I wish we were. That would have been great. But I think Goodie Nation is really so great at, lowering disarming founders, right? And giving us community. We, especially founders from underrepresented or underestimated groups, we feel like we have to always show up extra prepared. We have to show up with everything figured out, even though everybody knows no founder has everything figured out, right? And I think that's a bit of a burden that we carry, whether falsely or whether inflicted. It's just the reality that I think most people struggle with some level of their own confidence in how they're showing up. And founders, when fundraising, it's a challenge. So Goodie Nation, I think, really breaks down some of those barriers where we can see so many people that are like us that are showing up at so many different stages, but still overcoming challenges. So some are ahead, some are behind from just a stage perspective. But that cluster effect of putting us all together to collaborate, I think, is one of the Goodie Nation superpowers, right? And so being able to not only curate the conversations, but also somewhat force us through just structure to make space for it. Because also as a founder, you're just running fast, and sometimes, slowing down for the conversations that you didn't know you needed to have, or the relationships you didn't know you needed to build, is really important. And that structure of Goodie Nation, I think, for me, I'll just say, is essential to thinking about how these relationships can continue to grow. And so that I think that's one of the Goodie Nation superpowers for like being invited into such a community, having like Google be the catalyst that brought us together, but then seeing how Goodie Nation nurtures the relationships. It's just really inspiring. So that's my take.
Yeah, I definitely want to plus one everything that Joe mentioned. Specifically when it comes to, as founders, especially, first time founders coming from, underserved backgrounds, it's not like we have, this network of existing founders or, in the family that we can just reach out to that understand what it's like to go out and try to go after impact, but also, generate revenue, also, go after venture capital if that's the business structure you have, right? Where, the support system, internally can be really great, but not necessarily to talk about the hard stuff in the day-to-day operations that, over the last year plus that, we've been in huddles, you actually come to find out that a lot of founders are going through a lot of the same things, or they're just getting over it, or they're about to go into it. Right. And like Joe mentioned, being able to foster and have those conversations in a safe space as founders, where you're not trying to impress your customer, you're not trying to, impress an investor, but you're just trying to have an honest conversation and get to, an outcome where there's enough trust in the founders that we have that, if a couple of my founder friends with part of our huddles are saying it, there's probably a good chance that I'm not going to have to go down and, learn that mistake for myself the hard way. And I think, as we are, having to increase our, metrics and everything as we think about a new world of fundraising, that honesty and being upfront, I think, is so important that you just don't see in other, forums, whether that be Slack communities or on Twitter or anywhere else, where, it's intimate enough, it's relevant, from an industry perspective enough that, I feel comfortable and I feel, worthwhile actually attending. Right. And so the fact that community exists, I feel heard, I feel seen, and then I can also contribute. I'm not, as a founder, we're busy, but, it's always, important. And, I feel I get everything I put into it reciprocated whenever I do show up and, can contribute to the Goodie Nation community.
Well, that's great to hear that the programming made you feel like it was worth attending, because clearly Goodie Nation saw y'all and were like, yeah, y'all are worth investing in. So making sure that it's a symbiotic relationship. That's really nice to hear. Okay, so y'all are going through the programming, you're doing all the things, you're strengthening your abilities as founders individually. Tell us, I mean, I don't know if it was like one conversation or one text or one thing, or if it was like a series of things, when the two of you first were kind of like, well, how did this all go down? I guess this will be like almost maybe two different perspectives, which will be great. Joe, why don't you start us off?
All right, yeah, definitely a series of events, and I don't think the thought is as novel as people might think around just, hey, what if we were to combine at early stages? Your co-opetition, I think, is kind of the word you used. I love being a startup founder for that reason. There's a lot of people that are founders, and I've had so many founders who are actually direct competitors, who we meet and we talk and we think about it. I think it's really common in areas where the tech is just truly emerging. And not with everyone. It's not that you're on like a friend basis with everyone who's building in your space, but game respects game is kind of this conversation, right? Whether you're an athlete and you just think about that and you just acknowledge when people are out there solving hard problems. And so that connection, I think, is inherent if you're an open person and willing to connect with people who are doing great work. So then, string of events. Demi Fund, Danielle Schutz, she's a great managing partner over at Demi Fund. And, we have been talking about just the markets have been tough for quite a while now. And so thinking about how is innovation going to survive, it shouldn't be just about founders, trying to just extend runway as long as they can and giving and taking on innovation just so that you can survive. But really thinking about how can you be innovative, not in just the products that you're building, but in the way that you're structuring business and the organizations you're building. And so that kind of teed up a conversation, and then, whiteboarding session, deep dive sessions. This definitely did not happen overnight. I think it was about 5 months, probably, if I'm right, David. 5 months before we actually got it done. And so a lot of conversation, but super intentional conversation, right? And it started with a meaningful multi-hour meeting of, if this were true and if we did this, would we have a better impact? Do we truly believe in why we're doing this? And if that's true, then can we figure out the mechanics to make this work at this early of a stage of two businesses? And so, just like we innovate, I think founders, especially founders who fundraise, we're used to spending a lot of our creativity on just thinking about business operations. As much as we want 100% of our creativity to go into building our products, a lot of times we're spending a lot of that creative energy on thinking about business operations and creative approaches. So that's what spurred it, was really this one longer meeting after we both at least, started to think, hey, is there a there? And once we got there, it was more of, deep diving into technology, thinking about strategies, talking to legal counsel about how this has happened in the past, and then just continuing to move forward and figuring out if there was any major roadblocks that would stand in our way. And now we sit here today and there weren't any. And we're doing, I think we're building innovative products, but we're also kind of trailblazing a bit in the way that early stage founders think about options that we have when building teams, when putting together more and more talent, and when enhancing product, when fundraising, improving valuation, all of these things. So it's a laundry list of things that I think we're going to continue to prove out with what we're doing here.
Mm-hmm. Intentional conversations leading to the conversations about the nuts and bolts. And something, you've both been sort of mentioning a lot about the markets being tough and, VC dollars are shrinking. I come from the art world, and the artists, we're all fighting over the same pot of grants every year. And I just, as much as you want to collaborate, you do still have that thing in your head of like, but I need mine. I have to get mine. And so, Dave, I'm curious for you, like, your perspective on this situation. I love how you both seem to be so open to like, but actually we could do this together. What for you was sort of like during this imagination and intentional conversation phase? How do you remember it? How did it go down for you?
Yeah, no, I very similar to everything Joe mentioned. Like he talked about having very intentional, honest, vulnerable conversations, trying to really understand, where we were at. And I think, pretty early on, it was, pretty inherent that Joe and I, we like to talk about this with a lot of the partners we have, but, we share that same heartbeat where we understand what really matters, what, we're going after, and understanding also that, we can go a lot farther if we come together. And so, trying to be realistic as the CEO of Gritly, and looking at the external fundraising environment and seeing what I've been going through up until our first round, and then ultimately what a lot of my peers were going through, it just was not looking like it was going to get better before we had to really look at what does runway look like, how do we make sure we stay alive as long as possible so we can see some of these opportunities through. But just to know that we're going to end up having to pick up the fundraising phone again in the next 12 to even 6 to 12 months, depending on what actually closed capital looks like. And so for us, it was having to do some internalization and thinking about do we really, what are we doing this for, right? If I think it would have been easy to say from an ego perspective that this is all about proving that I'm the right person to lead us to the promised land, and the market's going to turn around. And while I deeply believe in that eternal optimism, it was also time for us to be realistic. And when the opportunity came up for us to explore if there was a there, it seemed pretty obvious pretty early on that this was an opportunity that was worth exploring. And so for me, I felt that I would actually be doing Gritly and all our stakeholders a disservice if I tried to turn away any opportunities to collaborate and turned any of those conversations negatively, versus let me be open to everything, because I've been trying the traditional route, right? We got some grant money, we got some venture capital, generating revenue, but still, if we really want to grow the way we plan to, and we really want to have the impact we plan to, there's probably a different way than what I've been trying that might make sense. And that's where really being able to collaborate with Joe, we were able to really find out what this looks like, how it comes together, and ultimately understand that at the end of the day, everything we're working on is much bigger than ourselves. And having that mindset was, very core to Gritly's culture, made, all the future conversations and really just seeing how everything aligned. It turned from, having those vulnerabilities to just nothing but excitement, to know that we're, going to have access to a lot more resources, to know that, fundraising is not going to be number one priority, but rather going and providing value and making sure that, our customers and future customers are going to be able to, revolutionize the way they hire. That, to me, that's why I started, the Gritly. That's why, we wanted to go out and have a change. It wasn't to just, sit here trying to consistently fundraise, when in all reality, we just don't see a lot of checks being cut in general. And so it was a honest and, really exciting process to get through. Definitely didn't happen overnight, but, I think it happened the right way. It happened with, a lot of buy-in from both sides, and really just more than anything, like I mentioned, just a ton of excitement about the world and how we plan to revolutionize it going forward.
I mean, like we hear all the time, teamwork makes the dream work, but like this actually feels like, oh, this will work a lot better if we pair up, which is so refreshing to hear in this space. And so to kind of wrap things up, I mean, this is an exciting new venture. Like you mentioned earlier, David, you about to change your title and all the things. And moving forward, what are you the most excited about, both of you, with all the incredible things that you're going to do next?
David, you want? Yeah, I mean, I can fire away. I'm super excited. For one, I think this doesn't work without cohesion between teams and founders specifically. Founders have strong personalities that show up differently. Even the most humble founder is silently has this deep confidence, or this deep these attributes that make them do what we do. And I think so. Starts with one of the things I'm excited about is the dynamics that David and Avi, his co-founder, will add to our team. I think that's really exciting. I think the other thing is I'm a huge believer in talent mobility and thinking about how understanding not only where talent fits, but understanding strategies around how to better align people for success within organizations. And that's taking all the conversations we've heard for years, transferable skills, emerging talent, right? Making those things tangible, making those things a reality, that companies actually have technology solutions that enable the right talent mobility, upward mobility, upskilling, better retention in healthcare, better patient care, right? Things that we can really focus on, where talent is the heartbeat of every single organization, especially in healthcare. And so being the leaders in building an end-to-end talent mobility platform that starts with thinking about emerging talent, upskilling all the way through, placement and employee mobility. I think that's really what excites me the most. And the fact that, David and team started on the candidate side, we started on the enterprise employment side, and it's a beautiful marriage between, it's as best a marriage you can get between two technology platforms that need to integrate for at least MVP testing and then continuing to rebuild on top of different things. That's exciting, So I think really just the impact that we can have, that our dream just really aligns so well. And now we're just able to force multiply that with additional capital behind us. There's going to be more even released around that. With this, we did a $2 million fundraising round, C2 round, that continues to propel us forward. And so I think that's what most excites me right now, is that we have an even more powerful team, an even more powerful product, and a united vision on how we can really have impact that just gets me super excited.
And so obviously there's a there, and it's easy for me to just say +1 to everything Joe just mentioned. But to add to that in, my own lens, I think it's, outside of the impact and outside of just being able to add value so much faster than, what we were trying to do solo, is really the opportunity to embrace the pressure in that now that our organizations, our products are going to be combining. I really feel that it's our race to lose in terms of innovation, in hiring, specifically in healthcare. And that pressure is something, I'm excited to lean into. I'm excited for us to, ultimately not have to go out and reinvent the wheel, but, just really come in and add that value and add it, and also the pressure of, being two diverse founders who, came up with this opportunity, actually are seeing it through. And, to also, Demi Fund and Danielle Schutz, none of this would be possible without them, to also prove them right too, right? I think there's a lot of founders that are thinking about innovative solutions for funding and really continuing on in their mission and visions, that we're going to start to see a number of, unique opportunities similar to ours become, more common. And so with that, I take pride in the fact that, we're one of the first to do it. And so not only do we have an amazing opportunity to, win this race from a product standpoint, but we also have a unique opportunity to be trailblazers in, entrepreneurship for founders of color in what is a new fundraising environment, 2023, 2024 now, that we're all going to have to adapt to. And so, there's still plenty to be learned, but I think we have the team to do it. Our products are going to come together in a way that, really excites us, and ultimately, excited to keep everyone updated in how all of this continues to go. But so far, I'd say we're off to a really exciting start.
And being excited about embracing the pressure of the journey is a really cool perspective. That's real. Like, this is both of y'all's baby now together, and you are being trailblazers, and you're setting the stage for future founders and hopefully future people who are going to hear this and maybe go, oh, maybe collaborating isn't that crazy. Maybe I should, instead of, trying to do this on my own, find a partner to do it with. And so I can probably speak for everyone at Goodie Nation. We're all rooting for you. We're all like, oh, this is so cool. We got to get him on the podcast. And so for everyone else who's listening right now, how can people find out more about you? How can, is it just through LinkedIn, website? How can other people sort of join this journey and root along with us?
Yeah, LinkedIn's my primary, just Joe Thurman on LinkedIn. And then, website, IIA Healthcare. is kind of where things will start to merge together, and you'll be able to follow the journey along there. But yeah, LinkedIn is my primary. Reach out, would love to connect, or find me on some Goodie Nation channel as well. Yeah, that's how you can reach out.
Yeah, similar to Joe, LinkedIn, always happy to network and build connections there, but also at David Has Grit on most social media platforms, as well as you can find me in the Goodie Nation community Slack, and plug in iiahealthcare.com.
Very nice. Well, there you have it on this very special episode of Why Relationships Matter. We talked about how just having intentional conversations can potentially lead to new ventures, new partnerships, new opportunities. We talked about how being just nice within your ecosystem, whether it's a small city, a big city, like just being a person that people feel comfortable talking to and getting advice from. It's not that hard of a thing to do. And so at the end of every show, we like to encourage you all listening to think about how you can do that in your own life, whether it's just sending a text message or email or forwarding somebody a link to an opportunity. That one small intentional thing could potentially be the catalyst for someone's career, for someone's life. You just never know. And so we want to thank our amazing guests, Joe and David. Follow them on all the places to find out more about them. And as our Goodie Nation founder, Joey Womack, always says, stay magnetic and outwork yesterday. Thank you for listening.